Let's talk about that, Patrick. What's your expert take on DeepSeek and the Chinese approach to dealing with AI and tech in this space?
Yeah, so I'll caveat that I'm not a computer scientist. I'm a political scientist and a public policy guy, but I'll do my best here. You're exactly right that we should be at least a little bit skeptical of where it came from. In my previous life, I got to live in Hong Kong, and I learned very quickly that you take anything that Beijing says with a huge grain of salt. That said, this is an open sourced AI model, and so we are able to independently test it and affirm that it's a pretty good model. It's a pretty powerful model. But this whole backstory about how they did it so affordably and how they did it on inferior processing chips and things like that, that's worth a little bit of scrutiny. I don't think they trained it for nearly as affordably as they said they did. And there's a lot of open AI walking so that other apps like DeepSeek could run.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show. Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on another fun-filled episode of The Brian Nichols Show. I am your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in actually sunny and warm Eastern Indiana. We're not here for the weather report, though, so don't worry. That's the last of the weather talk. The Brian Nichols Show is sponsored by our phenomenal sponsors over at AMP America. Head to ampamerica.com for all the news you need to know without the corporate media bias or fluff. We have articles, news, opinion pieces, podcasts, and more. Head over to ampamerica.com. Also, the Brian Nichols Show is powered by our awesome sponsors, of which you can see over my right shoulder here on the YouTubes or on X or whatever it is you're consuming your video content here today. If you'd be so kind, please go ahead and scan those QR codes to support our sponsors. Or if you're an audio listener or you're like, I don't want to scan that QR code, Nichols, I don't know what you got there, go over to briannicholsshow.com. You can find all of our sponsors listed, including our awesome sponsors, Cardio Miracle, Blood of Tyrants Wine, plus their amazing brand new Liquid Freedom Energy Tea, Mud Water, and more. So, folks, with that being said, really excited for today's conversation. We are going to talk all things tech, which I know for you longtime listeners, you're like, Brian, isn't your day job in the world of tech? How do you have any energy to talk about more tech during the day? And I hear you. But this is actually not like the tech. This is the policy behind the tech that we're going to talk about today. And with that, like how we have gotten to a point where you have so many folks who are freaking out over these brand new AI tools that are out there, or, you know, these big technology companies. Yeah, I'm looking at DeepSeek or TikTok or the likes. So joining us here on the Brian Nichols Show today, we have not a returning guest, a returning organization, NetChoice. We previously had been joined by our good buddy, Carl Szabo. But today we're being joined by Patrick Hedger from the great NetChoice. Patrick, welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. How you doing?
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm doing great.
Great to hear. For folks playing along on the home game, that is the second time we did our intro because StreamYard, which is what we record here on, updated and I lost like 30% of my settings. So apparently Patrick had to sit there as I'm mouthing all the intro to myself and nobody else apparently because I was not being heard. So Patrick, thank you for being patient with me today and thank you for joining us. Lots to discuss, all thing in the world of tech. But before we do that, do us a favor, introduce yourself here to the Brian Nichols Show. Maybe give folks a little bit of an understanding of who NetChoice is and what you guys are doing in the world of tech policy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've spent my entire career in sort of the free market advocacy and policy world, and I kept finding myself on the same side as NetChoice on a lot of really big, important battles for the future of technology and for the future of the internet. And NetChoice is a principles-based trade association that is advocating for an internet built on free expression and free enterprise. And that's a mission that I wholeheartedly support. And so I was pleased to join the team last October.
Great to have you on board. I'm looking forward to digging into said policy, which let's talk to start out today. China, we hear China talked about all the time, Patrick, in the news. Are they friend? Are they foe? Let's go back to 2010, 2011, when there was the whole episode of The Office where Michael and Oscar are debating whether or not China is going to be a threat in the future. that episode just feels more and more prescient as we watch it in, 15 years later, 10 years later. But here we are today, and China has definitely been making a big play in the tech space. And right now, as we're recording here today, Patrick, the new thing, the hot, sexy thing on the market is this brand new AI app that they developed called DeepSeek, which it looks like, if it is what they say it is, has changed the way that we develop AI forever. Because when you had Chat GPT spending $100 million to use all these NVIDIA chips, and it was just massive amounts of data sets, China's like, hey, we can do that with 5 million. And oh, by the way, we have a newer AI technology that we're leveraging, which it doesn't make sense to me. Maybe you can explain it to us today. But they can apparently localize the intelligence and learn based in the context of what's being talked about. And then I've heard that this is opening it up where we can put AI onto these little devices that we carry around in our pockets that are more or less supercomputers. So it sounds like, Patrick, there's a lot here with DeepSeek that could be great, but also, again, elephant in the room, came from China. So is it so good? Let's talk about that, Patrick. What's your expert take on DeepSeek and the Chinese approach to dealing with AI and tech in this space?
Yeah, so I'll caveat that I'm not a computer scientist. I'm a political scientist and a public policy guy, but I'll do my best here. You're exactly right that we should be at least a little bit skeptical of where it came from. In my previous life, I got to live in Hong Kong, and I learned very quickly that you take anything that Beijing says with a huge grain of salt. That said, this is an open sourced AI model, and so we are able to independently test it and affirm that it's a pretty good model. It's a pretty powerful model. But this whole backstory about how they did it so affordably and how they did it on inferior processing chips and things like that, that's worth a little bit of scrutiny. I don't think they trained it for nearly as affordably as they said they did. And there's a lot of OpenAI walking so that other apps like DeepSeek could run. And there's been some allegations of perhaps some corporate espionage happening behind the scenes. That said, China is where they are. Right? It's a good model. It's an impressive model. And regardless of how they got there, it should be a bit of a Sputnik moment, right? They have the technology to produce a competitive AI platform. So we've got to then look back and say, what can we do in terms of public policy, in terms of investment policy, things like that, to make sure that we're always staying a couple steps ahead, because we want the future of the internet to be built on US values. I think everybody agrees with that, right? Classically liberal values that are undergird the American system. That's what the future of the internet should be based on. That's what we believe the future of technology should be based on. Again, free enterprise, free expression. And so doing anything that allows us to cede that ground to China is a pretty dismal picture.
So let's play devil's advocate here, Patrick, because you hinted at this, right? But Patrick, it's open source. So can't be too bad, can it?
Yeah, there's trade-offs with anything, right? So there are some there's significant benefits with open source. You're able to drive innovation. You're able to have entrepreneurs, even folks like this company in China are able to innovate at a much higher rate. And overall, that's generally good. And there are certainly some things that we have learned from DeepSeek that our AI companies are going to be able to utilize and adapt. That's an important thing to have, but we always really want the cutting edge to be here in the United States. I think that's a really important principle and I think this is something that President Trump has actually been really great on so far, as he seems to have recognized that winning on AI is paramount. Winning on AI is winning the future. And a great example of how important this is to him is that within the first 48 hours, even I think it was 24 hours of taking office, right? Pretty busy time for anybody starting a new job. He took time to talk about AI and talk about this Stargate project, which is a private sector funded initiative to build out AI data centers and energy infrastructure to power those data centers. So for him to take time to recognize that, for him to continue to be harping on AI, and for him to call DeepSeek a wake-up call, I think he really gets this. And I think the rest of us ought to be paying attention and ought to be pushing our politicians to make sure we stay at the forefront of innovation and technology.
So AI has become the buzzword of what, the century. And that's actually like no pun or no tongue in cheek. Like it literally is like the number one thing in the 21st century, I think, besides the advent of the internet, right? To where we are today. AI has definitely taken that a jump forward. I can't tell you how many companies in my day job I see with their brand new names, company name .ai. And I'm like, oh, another one. It feels like, the internet bubble getting ready to burst again, but different conversation for a different day. But when we look at AI, right, like in my world, in the day job, I work in the world of customer experience. We call it CX. And we're seeing AI come in and really help, like it's helping make things more efficient, more effective, and it's empowering the agents. Because in our world of customer experience, we believe that's going to be people who are leveraging AI are going to be the ones who replace the people who aren't. Not so much this whole doom and gloom, like, oh my God, AI is going to replace everything. Like none of that stuff. Which I'm sure, give it 5 years, 10 years, that might be a different conversation, but let's cross that bridge when we get there. But I mean, Patrick, that's a use case in my world, like using AI to help empower customer service agents or helping the members or the customers when they're reaching out for help, like to be able to do some self-service options. Like let's have a conversation, what we call an IVA, an intelligent virtual agent, and have like a dialogue and actually feel that I'm getting my issues resolved, but I'm able to add context. I'm able to like, there's more to just pushing a button, yes or no, like press 1 for English, 2 for Spanish, like none of that stuff. But that's where we are today. Where do you see, I guess, with like the advent of things like DeepSeek, like, do you see the AI world changing or going down pathways that maybe we really haven't considered versus, most people just open up Chat GPT and they're like, let me have a fun conversation with Chat GPT. And that's like the epitome of their use of AI.
Yeah. So I mean, I think AI is going to follow the path that we see of pretty much any technology, right? Right now, we're at the gigantic cell phone with the battery pack that you have to sling over your shoulder. You can
Good
only make
times.
local calls, right. That's sort of where we are with AI right now, which is really exciting because I've even found in my job that AI is very useful and it's a massive productivity enhancer, right? I'm able to put in 100-page bill and ask AI and ask it, hey, what are the key provisions of this bill? And it gets it right pretty quickly, and it's accurate like 99.9% of the time. So if we're at this sort of almost stone age of AI and it's already this powerful, I think the future is very exciting. And I think you're exactly right to say that this is something where people that are able to utilize AI are going to find themselves to be more productive, and it's going to be a productivity enhancer for the average worker versus this sort of substitution effect that a lot of folks are afraid of. I mean, I like to point to folks and say, look, right now, certainly technology causes disruptions. It's important that we have programs and policies in place to address those things. But at the end of the day, there are more people alive today than ever before, doing more types of jobs than ever before. And we're at pretty high employment as well. So if technology destroys jobs, look, get rid of the wheel, ban fire, things like that, right? We don't want to fall into that kind of a fallacy where we're limiting ourselves, because the rest of the world is not going to do that. And I think that's what DeepSeek really teaches us, is that, if we were to pause or try and regulate AI to an extent that we're addressing all of our potential fears and things like that, we're going to hold ourselves back and not get any of the benefits. With any type of technology, there's a trade-off, right? Any policy, there's a trade-off. And it's about maximizing the good from these things. And I think that if we take too much of a precautionary approach to AI policy, we're going to find ourselves behind, and we're going to find a world where new internet users, particularly like in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, they're really starting to get access to the global internet for the first time. They're going to be using an internet that's dominated by Chinese firms instead of an internet that's dominated by American firms.
And we're going to talk about the Chinese firms here a little bit more in detail in a second. But like, I just want to go back to something you just said, because I want to paint the picture for folks of this use case, right? Because you mentioned, well, I guess, wheels or cars or whatever it may be should just, get rid of those too. Because that is exactly what I see happening right now, right? Like, I've heard so many folks, and this is a different conversation, but I'll show you how we're going to tie back here, right? I hear so many folks who, like, they are doom and gloom about AI. And very much, I think, in the same mentality of like, oh my goodness, we have this thing called an automobile. What about the horse and buggy drivers? No, like that mentality. But then on the flip side, let's make it like real, like based on our current policy conversations. I see nonstop people being like, oh, you don't support unfettered immigration? Well, who do you think's gonna pick your plants then, and your corn and your wheat? Who's gonna go out there and do that then? I'm like, well, maybe AI, maybe automation. Like, I don't know where we're going to be in 5 years, but based on what I'm seeing in the marketplace and the rapid advancements in this technology, doesn't sound like it'd be too far out there. I mean, Patrick, that is in my kind of my world right now that I live in, both for my day job, but also in this world of politics. I just see that we're having the same debates that we had 100 years ago, 75 years ago, 50 years ago. It's a different iteration of that debate based on whatever the shiny new thing is of the day. Is this just a human thing? Like we like the status quo. We don't like change. Like, is that it?
Yeah, I think, people are comfortable, and they don't, disruption can be painful for some folks. But yeah, I think it's important to kind of look back at that history and understand that, we wouldn't be where we are without the kind of permissionless innovation that we've seen throughout history, right? And we've always taken an incremental approach to regulating technology, and also tried to regulate specific harms, specific outcomes, instead of trying to overly regulate the technology as a whole to prevent all of those things, right? And I think any technology has a misuse, right? And so if you're committing fraud with Photoshop or you're committing fraud with AI, there shouldn't really be a difference in the statute there. Fraud is fraud. Mm-hmm. So just try and say we're going to create this new AI regulatory state or system or agency.
Hey folks, I want to take a moment to talk about something that has truly changed my life, and that is Cardio Miracle, our incredible studio sponsor. Now, I'll be honest, when I first heard about Cardio Miracle and their claims about improving heart health, I was skeptical. But after using it for just about 2 months, I was absolutely blown away by the results. First, my blood pressure went from being consistently around 140/90 to a much more healthier and manageable 120/80. And my resting heart rate dropped from the low 70s to the high 50s. And I couldn't believe it. But the benefits didn't stop there. I started sleeping better, and I felt more energized at the gym, and my heart felt the best it's felt in years. And it's not just me. Hundreds of you, our amazing listeners, have reached out to share your own incredible experiences with Cardio Miracle. So, what is Cardio Miracle, and how does it work? It's a carefully crafted supplement that harnesses the power of nitric oxide to support optimal heart function. So by increasing nitric oxide levels in your blood, Cardio Miracle helps relax your blood vessels, improve circulation, and it protects your heart from damage. It's like giving your heart the support it needs to function at its best. And here's the best part. We've got an exclusive offer just for you, our loyal listeners here at The Brian Nichols Show. When you head over to cardiomiracle.com and use code TBNS at checkout, you'll get an extra 15% discount on your order. Plus, with their 100% money-back guarantee, you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. So, if you're ready to take control of your heart health and experience the life-changing benefits of Cardio Miracle for yourself, just click the link in the show notes or video description. Trust me, your heart will thank you. And don't wait another day to prioritize your health. Join the tens of thousands of folks who have already discovered the Cardio Miracle difference. Head to cardiomiracle.com now and use code TBNS for 15% off your order. Your journey to a happier and healthier heart starts today. And now, let's get back to the show.
It's just going to create a lot of paperwork. It's going to create a lot of deterrence to the investment that's necessary to take us from this sort of Model T phase of AI or giant brick cell phone phase of AI and take us to the next level where this is a mass deployed technology. It's able to be utilized in any number of different use cases. And to an earlier point, I think you were getting at, be deployed in a way where you don't have the infrastructure that we're building for AI will be able to power a lot more AI, right? Not today's use cases. And so by shrinking the technology, shrinking its energy demands and data demands and things like that, you're going to be able to deploy it a lot more, and you're going to be able to have a lot more people utilizing that technology to enhance their own productivity. Almost all technological revolutions that we have seen are major productivity enhancers. And I think a lot about a quote from the great Thomas Sowell, who said, he talks and defines economics as the study of how to allocate scarce resources to meet, and here's the key part, unlimited human wants.
Hmm.
And so AI is really going to unlock the way we use resources, and those resources include humans, right? Human work hours, and unlock that in a way that's going to allow us to meet a lot more economic demand for things that people can't even imagine yet. So I'm very optimistic about it, but it's, certainly we need to be ready for potential disruptions. We need to be ready to help people transition into an economy that's got a lot of AI deployed in it. So those are important conversations that we need to be having, but trying to stop this from ever happening is just going to leave the country behind.
I mean, that proverbial genie has already gotten out of the bottle, in my opinion. Like, AI is here, and I don't see it going away. And we started our conversation today about DeepSeek in China. Is the fear, I guess, Patrick, is it because China is such a geopolitical foe that we look at? I mean, this is a conversation that goes beyond DeepSeek. It goes into the TikTok debate, right? I know there's a whole thing we were going to talk about Temu being leveraged as like a weapon against Amazon, right? So, like, is this just another iteration? Not even, let's remove the tech conversation, right? But let's go more towards like the political side. Is the fear around a lot of these newer technologies, specifically coming from China, is it due to the fact that it's got the China name next to it, or is there actually nefarious things, and be that DeepSeek, be that TikTok, or be that Temu, right? Like, is it actually a real threat that we need to start taking more and more seriously?
Well, when it comes to something like AI, and DeepSeek is a great example. I'm sure lots of folks have seen that people have tried to test out DeepSeek, and they have found that DeepSeek will not produce truthful answers about certain topics.
Tell me about Tiananmen Square.
Correct.
No.
And so this kind of gets at a point that I was making earlier, is that I think we should want the 21st century internet to be built on and built by Americans, and that there's a sense of openness, truth, things like that undergird the systems that we're building and that the rest of the world has access to.
Really quick, and I'm not going to try to interrupt, but I want to challenge that a little bit, because let's go back like 2 years. Well, not even 2 years. Like, go back a year ago. Like, Google Gemini was getting in trouble because you would say, make me a picture of a Nazi soldier, and it would like spit out images of like African Americans as Nazi soldiers in some name of DEI, or go to the Twitter files, and you see where all of a sudden a government entity like the White House in this case was actually having direct relationships with Twitter to say, hey, so there's going to be this article coming out about Hunter Biden, the son of the sitting president. Yeah, that's disinformation. Flag it. Or ban people entirely, like the New York Post, from even sharing it. So I hear you, but like, do we not see the conspiracy for corruption right here in our own soil?
Yeah, I think stopping that kind of jawboning that we did see is part of what we need to do going forward to ensure that we have great AI investment and competition. Those things are really important. And to any particular flaws or things like that with existing systems, competition is the best remedy for these things. And you're not going to have competition if you've got government suffocating companies and trying to jawbone companies one way or another, or creating new overhead AI regulatory regimes that are micromanaging the type of investment and use cases that we have for AI. So this is all kind of part of the umbrella of a good AI strategy going forward, which is keeping government out of the way, whether it's the government, again, trying to pick winners and losers in terms of use cases and firms, or government picking winners and losers in the information space as well. They shouldn't be doing that anyway because of the First Amendment, but there are some policies that we've been supportive of at NetChoice. That there's a bill by Rand Paul, for example, that would prevent the government from doing the kind of job owning that we saw. It sort of codifies the executive order that we saw Trump put in place as soon as he took office here in his second term, to try and prevent the future abuse of government power over technology firms to censor content. I think everyone agrees that's a problem, and it's something that needs to be stopped. Putting your finger on the scale and then using the threat of regulatory damage, right? The ability to lean on a company in one area and then potentially, if you don't get what you want there, putting regulatory pressure in another to affect that end. We saw a little bit of that, and it's incredibly toxic. And that's not how you build a great AI ecosystem going forward. So that kind of stuff has to stop. I think we've got a good opportunity here with the Trump administration to make sure that stuff doesn't happen again.
Patrick, devil's advocate time again. But let's just say that we go to our free market approach, and may the best artificial man win. What happens if, we remove all the fingers off the buttons, right? We remove all the weights off the scale, and we just say company versus company, right? Go do your thing. And what if DeepSeek wins? What if TikTok wins? What if Temu wins? Is there not an argument from some of our more, I would say, friends on the side of the aisle, not even the side of an aisle, just the friends who are more empathetic to using government power? Is there not an argument to say, well, China won, now what?
Yeah, so in winning and losing in this case, there's clearly losing, right? And there's also winning, but I don't think in the world of innovation, the finish line is constantly moving down the road. And so it's always about making sure that you're getting closer to that than the other guy at any given point in time. And sometimes we'll fall a little bit behind, but as long as you're keeping pace and staying ahead for the majority of the time, right? Again, we're at the very infant stages of what we know of as AI. And it's not like this is, again, ever going away as a technology. It's going to change. It's going to improve, just as computers have, just as cell phones have, just as the internet itself has. And so that, again, there's no real finish line here, but it's important to always kind of stay ahead. And I think if you look at the US system versus what we see overseas, whether it's the European Union or China, they will always have that greater urge for the command and control. Mm-hmm. We've seen that even with China a little bit in recent years, where you had China opening up, embracing more market policies and things like that. And then all of a sudden, there's kind of been a retrenchment into the central planning under Xi Jinping. And China's economy has suffered recently because of that. And so I think we have got a great opportunity to kind of use that to our advantage to kind of stay out ahead of the Chinese when it comes to research and development and being on the leading edge of technology.
Because like my gut is telling me like this just feels like a conversation that I was having with some folks in like 2019 with Huawei. Huawei. I'm not Chinese and I don't pretend to be. That's probably better for many reasons across the board. But like when I look at Huawei, whatever it's called. For folks who are not familiar, Huawei is a phone company, a technology company based in China, and they had and have some pretty awesome products, like from a technology standpoint, a UI standpoint, an interface standpoint. Like their cameras are out of this world. Their user friendly applications are out of this world. And yeah, it's a Chinese product, and then got the big red X from the US government saying, nope, no Huawei allowed. So Huawei is now relegated to being a China-centric, Chinese-only company. And I guess let's just pretend, Patrick, that like in 2019, the US government didn't do that. And the US government was like, free market. Let's see what happens. And let's say Huawei had taken over the market and like they replaced Android or they replaced iPhone. As crazy as that might sound, let's just pretend they did, right? And then let's just pretend that we found, flies in the ointment with Huawei, and we see, they have been spying on U.S. citizens at that point. And I'm painting the picture, by the way, of worst case scenarios, because this is where most of the folks will go. So like in that kind of an example, and replace Huawei for TikTok or replace Huawei for DeepSeek, like DeepSeek, not DeepSeek, DeepSeek. If those became kind of like the status quo options, is there a threat because we're now building those status quo options based on the fact that they are Chinese companies, which from a free market standpoint shouldn't matter, except China obviously has this, what are they, the CCP? What does that stand for? The Communist or Chinese Communist Party or whatever it is, right? So that's obviously a big red flag there. Is there any merit to that fear there, Patrick?
Well, if anybody's using technology as a weapon, there's certainly a case for government to intervene. That is, I think you'd find very few people that would disagree with that notion. But again, I think it's really important to focus on what are we doing to prevent that eventuality, because that's where we're at right now. And there's a lot of focus about, well, what are we going to do about China? Well, we're not thinking enough about what we've done to ourselves. And that, I think, is what's been really kind of been missing from this conversation a lot. There's a lot of, there's fear about DeepSeek. There's fear about other things, the other types of technology that are out there, instead of looking at the barriers to creating better systems ourselves.
Yep.
And that is something that has been entirely missing from this equation. We're not going to, I fear that we're not going to add red tape and get ourselves ahead in any particular situation, right? What are we doing in terms of incentivizing research and development here in the United States, right? A lot of those good, beneficial research and development tax incentives have been allowed to lapse. I think that's a big problem, right? We still have, it's great that the corporate tax rate came down, but it came down to about middle of the pack, and other countries keep cutting. So how are we, continuing to bring major companies back into the United States to invest here, do research and development here? Let's look at how we're treating our existing champions in technology. Every major company that you can think of that is involved in this AI space right now is either under investigation or already being sued by the federal government for antitrust. And companies that largely all compete with one another are being labeled monopolies and are still in court. I mean, even with the transition from the Biden administration to the Trump administration, these cases are ongoing. So it remains to be seen what the Trump administration is going to do in terms of settling those cases. But that's a lot of time, resources, and hesitancy on the part of these companies, right? If you're being sued by the federal government on antitrust grounds, you're going to be really hesitant to make a major investment in a potential new startup that's at the cutting edge. So I think we can cross the bridges on national security as they present themselves. The government's very good about, finding national security things to do something about. We really need to be focused on never letting ourselves get into that position.
Well, and this is like the Mark Andreessen argument, right? Before the election, he's like, yeah, I sat down with the Biden team. Wasn't Biden, because Biden doesn't know what he had for breakfast, let alone what's happening for AI policy. But I digress. And he sits down with the Biden team, and they're like, listen, don't invest in this world. There's only gonna be like 3 companies that we're gonna allow to be in this AI space. We're gonna partner with them. So it's a fruitless venture. Don't. And he said that was the moment I decided, yep, okay, we're gonna go vote for Trump, and not just vote for Trump. We're gonna enthusiastically support and champion Trump. And I think that's speaking to kind of that truly pro-market, pro-free enterprise type of system to work. Because you're right, like this is how you test ideas, test products, right? Is in a true free market, and may the best app win. And in those use cases where TikTok is weaponized, like, okay, make that argument, right? But let's not just do a universal ban saying this is bad because it came from China. Which, speaking of which, there is always a segue somewhere, Patrick. And today's segue is going over to same church, different pew, a different technology company, but this one also from China and also rivaling one American company in Amazon, Temu. Everybody has heard of Temu at this point, I think, where you go and you spend $2 for some version of a very expensive product, only to get like a just goofball version of it when it arrives at your door. You're like, oh, this is supposed to be a brand new laptop, and you get it, and it's just like 2 pieces of plastic shoved together with a screen. They call it a computer, stuff like that. And we've seen Temu definitely reach into more and more of the American purview, going back to last year's Super Bowl, where they had, I think, 2 or 3 Super Bowl ads. So like that was kind of like the moment I was like, oh, Temu's actually here, and they're actually trying to compete in America. And that kind of opened my eyes that this is something more than just a place where you go and order the goofy version of the actual like legitimate product. So talk to us about Temu. I know they're using some legalese behind the scenes to try to go after companies that we know and love, like Amazon. So what's the story here, Patrick?
Yeah, so what we found out just within the last few days, actually, is that the Biden administration, the Federal Trade Commission under the Biden administration, famously chaired at the time by Lena Khan, was going after Amazon, creating a case to go after Amazon for monopolizing retail, monopolizing online retail. And one of the ways they were doing that and trying to build that case was looking to one of Amazon's greatest competitive threats right now, which is an e-commerce giant, Temu, which is a Chinese-based company, to build their case against Amazon. And that is just super problematic for everything that we just discussed in our conversation, right? How are we going to stay ahead? How are we going to ensure American companies are staying ahead in any kind of market or technology space when their own government is pulling one of the ropes, right, trying to pull them down? That is a huge problem. And unfortunately, it wasn't an isolated case with FTC reaching out to Temu to get their perspective on the case against Amazon. What we've seen is that the Biden administration also was cooperating and even assisting European governments, particularly the European Union, in its investigations and laws against American companies. The Digital Markets Act and the Digital Services Act over in the European Union essentially outlawed a lot of things that aren't even illegal under U.S. competition policy in a way to kind of specifically target American firms. And the Biden administration was openly bragging about this. You can see press releases on the Department of Justice's website saying, yeah, we met with the European Union, we're going to help them. It's just kind of crazy to me that we've had for 4 years, essentially an administration that was not just antagonistic, but allergic to innovation, allergic to America's tech champions. So we're hoping it's hard to do worse than the Biden administration was on these fronts. So we're hoping that this sort of new openness to AI from the Trump administration is a sign of much better things to come.
Can somebody just clip what Patrick said? It's worse to do worse than the Biden administration. Just cut off the qualifier in this use case, because I think that's across the board. Like, I look at the past 4 years, and this will be my final thoughts before I turn things over to you to bring us home there, Patrick. But like the past 4 years, when I went in, actually, let me rewind a little bit further. Let's go back to 2019. 2019, I was what you'd consider to be like a tried and true classical liberal, libertarian, whatever, small L libertarian. I believe that folks, by and large, were libertarian at their core, and that they would want to embrace free market, free enterprise, free expression, like all that kind of stuff, free, right, across the board. And by free, not like, free dollars, folks. We're talking about like the freedom to be able to do things. And then COVID happened, and I saw what an allergic reaction there was by the public, by and large, to the idea of freedom, medical freedom. I don't want to put this experimental vaccine in my arm. Well, you're anti-science and you want grandma to die. That's what you care about, right? No, I'm expressing medical freedom. That idea, and then you couple with the Biden administration taking power, and then the manifestation of that mentality of no, we don't like freedom. We like freedom where we want it and where we say. And then I see what the Biden administration was doing both on screen, but also behind closed doors. And like, oh man, I used to go crazy. And I was one of these people at first until I saw the writing on the wall where it's like, oh, Twitter can ban this name horrible person here because they're a private company. They can do what they want. Damn it. I got my wool pulled over my eyes there, because then Twitter Files happens and you see, no, the FBI literally had an office at Twitter HQ telling them, yeah, you should get rid of that person. What? No. Holy cow. Like, I was making that argument. Like, they're a private company. They can do what they want. And then you see the different areas that you outlined here today where the Biden administration, and I'm going to just emphasize the administration part, because this, again, wasn't just Joe Biden. This is his entire team. This is his entire regulatory agencies that were behind him. And they were going after the ideas of freedom, right? They were going after tech freedom. They were going after medical freedom. And that, for me, like, that was the moment that, dare I say, I kind of became, I don't say radicalized, because I'm saying it in a tongue-in-cheek way, Patrick. Like, that was, for me, the moment I realized that not only are there a lot of people who are unlibertarian in our public, they're not just libertarian at their core waiting to realize I'm a libertarian, but rather there are people who they don't like freedom, and they will support, be it voting for, enthusiastically cheering, whatever it may be, folks who will leverage the use of government to get rid of freedom, to curtail freedom. And that was like the moment I said, okay, it's either we are in the position to stop these abuses from happening, and if so, that requires us doing the scary thing called leveraging power, right? But then understanding it's like, the Jordan Peterson quote. I'm gonna butcher it too, but it's like, I don't want like just a good man. I actually want a dangerous man who knows how to be good, right? I don't want just a good government. I want a dangerous government who knows how to be good, to stop people from going and using these tools of power to like turn people's freedom of expressions into like, nope, that's hate speech, or nope, that's medical misinformation, right? Like I'm done with that. So I say all that. Thank you, because you are helping fight the tech freedom side of things, and helping bring these issues to a very real, marketplace where people are demanding alternatives. That we've had 4 years of the government pushing their thumb down on a tech censorship standpoint. I think the 2024 election was a very, very big eye opener for a lot of folks, particularly in the tech space. And not only are people by and large done with the censorship, but they resoundingly voted for a change, which we are now definitely seeing with Donald Trump in office, Operation Stargate, or whatever the hell it's called, with the $500 billion being funded in private equity towards these AI tools. So it's happening. Change has arrived. That's my final thoughts for today. Patrick, what do you have for us for your final thoughts? And of course, where can folks go ahead, reach out to you and support the amazing team over at NetChoice?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of wrapping up our entire conversation, you brought up a great question about, what do we do about if, potentially hostile technology controlled by potentially hostile actor becomes the market dominant force or something like that. That's not going to happen if we continue to do what we know is the secret sauce of American innovation, which is openness, free exchange of ideas, real free market capitalism, right? The cream rises to the top. It doesn't get subsidized to the top, right? We're not picking winners and losers. As long as we get back to that, which we unfortunately had a bit of a pause at during the Biden administration, as long as we get back to that secret sauce, America will always stay ahead, because there's always going to be that next entrepreneur in the garage that's cooking something up that is going to change the world. And I fundamentally believe that it has been true throughout history. It's going to remain true. And so that's what's really important that we get back to. We'll find ourselves behind the eight ball, no doubt, if we continue to do what the Biden administration did, right? A rejection of free speech, a rejection of true open competition, protecting competitors, not competition itself. If we abandon all of those things, follow the path that Europe has taken, right? What major technology company exists in Europe? I mean, where is their Microsoft? Where is their Google? Where is their Amazon? You can't think of one. I can think of Chinese counterparts, but I can't think of European counterparts. And so it's really important that we don't follow down that path, where you do see a lot of explicit censorship. You do see trying to command and control every last little bit of innovation that happens there. And that's a recipe for disaster. And we're trying to prevent that from happening here in the United States. That's ultimately our mission. Again, NetChoice is a trade association, but we are a principles-based trade association. Our guiding principles are, again, making the internet a place for free enterprise and free expression. And you can find what we do at netchoice.org.
And that's why you guys have been recurring guests here in the program, because you guys are fighting the good fight. And like, you do it when it's not always the most popular thing. And that's how you know you got a good organization. When we had Carl on the show many a time, we're talking about the tech censorship that's happening behind the scenes. And, we were doing so with very real like threats of being censored ourselves. And like, that speaks to why you guys are doing what you're doing and why it's so important. So folks, if you got some value from today's conversation, you know what I'm going to ask you to do. First and foremost, you got to hit that little share button down below if you're watching us over on the YouTubes. And if you got some value, head to the comments and let us know, because that's how the YouTube algorithms actually tell people are having a real conversation about this and direct more people to the video. So that's number one. But number two is that if you are noticing, like, and I know we didn't get to this today, Patrick, and I apologize, but if you notice like, local politicians or state politicians starting to, dip their toe into this regulatory world or this anti-competitive world, reach out to Patrick and the team over at NetChoice. At the very least, they can help guide you towards the different arguments or the different resources you can leverage to stand up and fight back. Or I'm just guessing you guys know a few folks in your little Rolodex there, Patrick, to help fight the good fight at a state and local level. So we're going to include all those links there in the show notes, folks. Please, again, support the team over at NetChoice. And with that, Patrick, any final thoughts or final words as we go ahead and wrap things up today?
No, that's great. I really enjoyed our conversation. And, I think people should, if anything, be optimistic about the future. We're solving incredible problems with technology. And I'm really excited to see what the next 10, 20 years holds. And I got to be honest, it's been great. It's been great. And to see that a lot of this is happening right here in the United States, for everything that's happened over the last few years, for us to still kind of be on the cutting edge, whether it's this new supersonic plane we saw out in the desert recently, whether it's Elon Musk parallel parking rockets, or whether it's AI, we're really at the dawn of a potentially new golden age of technology. And if we get the policy right, that's going to benefit everybody.
As our good buddy Patrick Bet David says, the future looks bright, and I can't agree more. With that, we're going to go ahead and put a pin in today's conversation. Again, folks, if you got some value, go ahead, give it a share. If you're joining us on the audio version of the podcast, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe button. And of course, you can subscribe to The Brian Nichols Show wherever it is you listen to your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or elsewhere. Also, The Brian Nichols Show is a video show as well, so you can go ahead and find us on YouTube, on Rumble, on X, and on Facebook? Yeah, Facebook. So go ahead, give us some love. And when you do, head down below and let us know your thoughts on today's topic. But with that being said, thank you for joining us. Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Patrick Hedger from NetChoice. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.